Well, hi again, folks. I'm Michael Tomasky, editor of the New Republic, and this is the new edition of Tomaskycast. And look who I've got today. You recognize him. That's Khanna, member of the House of Representatives from California. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Michael, thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great time to have you here. A lot of stuff going on Capitol Hill. So let's start there. The day that we're doing this on Wednesday evening, and it became official this morning about your new leadership in the House. So tell me first what you think about Hakeem Jeffries and the new team.
Well, it marks a generational change, which is exciting for the caucus. There is a unity in the caucus, which is refreshing, that we haven't had leaks and backbiting and people taking shots at the leaders before they even get started. Quite unique for the Democratic Party.
That's a good sign.
But I think, look, people are hopeful. But I'll say this, and I like Hakeem Jeffries on a personal basis. He's a consensus builder. He listens. But one of the key things, I think, Michael, is that the reason people want a new generation of leaders is because they want new thinking and new ideas. They have been frustrated with an economy that since 1980 has cost the working class and middle class 25% of their wealth, where the working and middle class have lost 25% of their wealth since 1980. Yep. And so a new generation is really a hunger for a new vision and new ideas. And a new generation is seen as a proxy for that, and they will get the benefit of the doubt for a while. But it can't be a substitute for just having the status quo. What I hope is that we'll have a generational change that will also lead to a substantive change in what we advocate for.
So do you think Hakeem Jeffries is committed to that kind of economic agenda? I mean, I know he grew up in Brooklyn in a union household and so forth. Do you get the sense from him that he would embrace that kind of change?
I think he will be open to it. I think Hakeem Jeffries in many ways is like President Biden, someone who can sense where the Democratic Party is headed and where the median is headed. And I think the Democratic Party understands that globalization didn't work for the working class, that globalization didn't work for the middle class. That's not a rejection of globalization, but we need to have an understanding that economic wealth was concentrated, that we need to bring production back. And so we need to invest in people again. So the job of the Progressive Caucus is going to be to push the leadership to embrace these new ideas. And I think at the very least, Hakeem Jeffries is not going to come in with an ideological opposition. But I think it'll be for us to push him in the direction that embraces a working class, middle class economic agenda.
Right. You took 2 votes today on the railroad strike situation. Just talk to people about that for a little bit. Your assessment of what Biden did here, and your assessment of whether this is they're going to get those sick days.
Well, I respectfully disagreed with what the White House did initially, which was to say, let's have Congress pass the tentative agreement that only had 1 sick day for railroad workers. I mean, just think about this as common sense. You have a job, someone you know has a job, they fall sick, they get COVID, which is a 5-day requirement of quarantine, and you're telling them you can't get more than 1 paid sick day. It's inhumane. And we were being forced to vote on that. Senator Sanders came out against it. I and a few other progressives said we'll vote no. And Senator Sanders, to his credit, really shifted the debate. We've got 7 days of leave, paid leave for the workers, which we passed today, which is a great result of Senator Sanders and the progressives really making that demand. Now, I would have wished that was passed in one package, not split up as it has. But Senator Sanders and others are hopeful we could get some Republicans. Let's see. What I hope doesn't happen is that they pass the version without the paid sick leave. That would be a bad outcome. And now it remains to be seen what happens in the Senate.
So what happens if the Senate passes the version without the 7 days and fails to pass that better version? What happens next?
Well, then it goes to the president's desk and the president signs it, and you don't have this paid sick days, which is why some of us were pushing that it shouldn't be in this 2-step process. It should really be one legislation that has the sick days, but we didn't get that from leadership. And it's hard for us to argue for that out of the House, given that the House, we passed it with the sick days. But that is the risk. Now, Senator Sanders' team believe that there are Republicans like Rubio, like Cruz, who are going to vote for this. And I guess we'll see when the rubber hits the road.
Those great working class heroes suddenly.
Well, they understand. They one of the statistics that makes me think that Donald Trump is still strong in the Republican Party, for better or worse, is if you look at the polling and you look at DeSantis and others, they're neck and neck with Trump in some polls. You look at the underlying numbers. Yeah. Trump, in almost every poll I see, wins 80% of Republicans without a college degree, of working class Republicans. And I think more people in the Republican Party are catching on that they are not going to have a future either in the Republican Party or the country if they continue to ignore the needs of the working class.
Of course, your party shed working class voters in these midterms by a few percentage points.
We did. And I think we did a great job running on democracy against extremism. We did a great job on running on abortion and making it clear that a woman has a right to control their own body and the freedom to do that. Notice that the Republican position is more extreme than the position that either Reagan, Bush, or Trump took. Yeah. None of them ran on no abortion, even in rape or incest. And that was the position of a lot of these Republican candidates. And it made a difference. I mean, I was talking to someone, but I was in Ohio for Thanksgiving, 18-year-old kid who was a Republican who voted on abortion for Tim Ryan. I mean, it really made a difference. But we did not, in my view, have a compelling enough economic message for the working class. We have a story to tell. We need to really be much more visible, bold, and omnipresent in communities left out of globalization to tell that story.
So let's switch now into talking about your views here and the things that you've been putting forward. So you have this phrase, economic patriotism, which you've been using a good bit, and featured in a Boston Globe op-ed piece that you did. Tell people what you mean by that.
What I mean is that the Democratic Party needs to be the party that brings government, the private sector, educational leaders, and workers together to build industry in every part of America and the new industry in America. And we can do this. This is what FDR did to build America. This is what Hamilton did to build America. Look, the reality is we made a colossal mistake as a country. Both parties did. We decided that production didn't matter. We shipped away people's jobs. We took away their ability to make a living. And then we had the pandemic, and we said we didn't make masks in America. We didn't make enough baby formula in America. We didn't make Tylenol in America. We didn't make antibiotics in America. We didn't make semiconductor chips that we invented in America. And people said, what happened? What happened? We have to realize that people are right to be upset at the governing class. People are right to be upset at the economic elites and the economic drivers of the globalization without constraints agenda, where corporations went just for cheap labor and lower environmental standards. And we need to say, look, we have an actual vision to fix this, partly because of technology, because the new technology in digital technology and cloud technology and 3D printing can make steel production, aluminum production, tire production more possible in America if we have the government working with the private sector and educational institutions and labor to do so. And that's the essence of what I call a new economic patriotism. One more sentence. The way we should contrast with Trump is simple. We should say, look, we understand in 2016 why some people were angry and voted against the Democratic Party. We understand that. But what was Trump's solution? He said, I'm going to give a tax cut to Intel. So Intel doesn't have to pay 35% tax. Now they can pay 20% tax. Yeah. I know the CEO of Intel. Let me tell you something. If you give Intel a tax cut, they're not going to say, let's go create jobs in Indiana. Let's go create jobs in Michigan. They're going to say, thank you. Here's the money to the shareholders, and let's go create jobs in Malaysia. Yeah. What did we do? We said, no, we're going to give you incentives if you build the factories in Ohio. So we should embrace the fact that people are legitimately upset, but that we have a better economic vision to actually create new industries and new factories in America.
You were a co-sponsor of the Chips and Science Act, right?
The co-author,
Co-author,
I wrote the initial version of called Endless Frontiers. I wanted $1 trillion over 10 years. Schumer called me up and he said, there's no way that's happening, but why don't we do $100 billion and I'll lead it, and he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for getting it across the finish line.
Yeah. What's it doing out there in the United States right now, that act?
It's led to 2 factories being built in Columbus, Ohio, $20 billion of investment in Ohio. By the way, every Republican in that area voted for the Chips and Science Act.
Right.
Senator Portman voted for it. DeWine ran his re-election on saying he's bringing the Intel factories. But it's not just about the jobs. It's not just about the economic revitalization. It's about showing that Silicon Valley, the coast, filled with wonderful immigrants, can work to create jobs in the heartland of America, work to create jobs for 4th and 5th generation Ohio families. People who have seen total job loss are now going to see that they can work together with coastal communities to help rebuild the future of America. I believe in economic patriotism actually is about stitching this country back together, and it's different from economic nationalism, which says only some people of certain races and certain communities are going to be part of the job creation. What economic patriotism says is we need immigrants. We need every community to really build America's future.
Yeah. I know that housing is a big part of your vision for how to change the economy. Talk about that. What should the federal government be doing?
Well, housing is the biggest way that people build wealth in America.
Yeah.
And we have seen home ownership stagnate at around 62%. Home ownership for the Black and Latino community is below 50%. So we need to figure out how do we get more people to be able to buy homes, and we need to figure out how do we get more people into affordable homes to rent, because the rent has gone up dramatically for many working class and middle class families. I would say there are 3 pillars to that. First, we've got to build more housing. I mean, the NIMBYism in my district and in places around the country and cities where we're not willing to build more affordable housing is really hurting us. Second, we've got to say, stop having Wall Street get subsidized by tax dollars to buy up homes and then flip them or hold them vacant and turn them into Airbnbs or rental properties. I have a bill that would end Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae in the secondary market from subsidizing Wall Street from buying up these homes.
Tell people a little bit more about how prevalent a practice that is, because that's something that a lot of people may not know is even going on.
Well, look, when you look at the national numbers, it's 1 to 2%, but that's the wrong way to look at it. When you look at it in Phoenix, when you look at it in Las Vegas, when you look at it in places of California, what you have is Wall Street basically targeting homes under $500,000, buying them up, and then holding them for more than 18 months often, and allowing them to appreciate or turning them into rental properties and pricing out working class and middle class families. I mean, it's not complicated. If you increase the demand, which is what Wall Street's doing for homes that are for the working class, you're going to increase the price. And we needed this. Look, after 2008, there was a legitimate argument that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae should be subsidizing that kind of home purchasing because housing had been totally depressed, and you may have needed private equity and others to try to invest to lift up prices. But come on, it's been 14 years. We don't need them doing it now. And we've still continued Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae with the subsidies. So my bill calls to end those subsidies. And it says have a vacancy tax where if you hold one of these homes for more than 18 months, you're going to pay 100% of the tax, so that Wall Street's not buying our homes. We're not serfs to Wall Street. We didn't fight a revolution to be serfs to Wall Street, but people and families are buying homes.
Yeah. You were going to mention your third leg of your triad.
The third leg is what Maxine Waters' bill, which is assistance for first-time home buyers with down payment. And she had a bill of $100 billion of assistance. And we tried getting $10 billion in the Build Back Better, but there's got to be a program of getting assistance to to first-time home buyers. Look, for people whose families have done well, they have that assistance. Their assistance is their parents and their grandparents. And I don't begrudge that. What I just want is that other people who may not have that benefit of having parents or grandparents who have done well should have the opportunity to get into a home and build wealth.
Uh, Energy, I know, is also an important issue for you, and that has to do with current gas prices. But I assume it goes beyond that to take in greening the economy in certain ways and other aspects of changing energy policy.
Absolutely. There are three reasons why we should have a moonshot on renewable energy. One is the most obvious. We need it to hit the Paris goals and not have temperatures rise more than 1.5 degrees from pre-industrial conditions.
Yeah.
And we need to do that solar, wind, we need geothermal, we need hydro, we need an all of the above approach, and that's going to require a moonshot. Second, we want to be making the new products, the new industries in the United States. You know, aluminum is being made in China. It's terrible for the environment, made out of coke. Why don't we have that made out of hydro in the United States? Why don't we have the greening of industry? Because that's also going to create the new industrial jobs in the United States, the new battery plants, the new electric vehicle plants, the new production for renewable energy, the new steel, and the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, is a down payment on beginning that. And then third, we don't want to be dependent on Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela for anything. And we're dependent on petrostates, which distorts our foreign policy because we aren't energy independent with renewables and other forms of energy. Even if we were energy independent on oil, we'd still not hurt the petrostates. The only way you actually diminish the petrostates' power is by having an alternative. And so national security should mean we are pushing for alternative energy.
Yeah. I want to get into talking here about the next 2 years because, you know, the Republicans are going to control the House. There's not going to be any chance of any progressive legislation along any of these lines, obviously. So it's going to be up to the Biden administration to do some of this stuff by executive fiat, by lawsuits that the antitrust division might bring or the FTC might bring, a variety of ways. So I want to ask this in two parts. First of all, you just mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. Implementing that and getting that going seems to me like that's going to be a really, really important thing. What's happening there to your knowledge, and what do you think it's important to show the American people by 2024?
Well, I think the implementation of that is going to be critical. One, to not get deterred or slowed down by Republican investigations, because they're going to try to look for the one example of something that didn't work out, like they did with Solyndra, and try to put a dampening effect in the loans going out, a dampening effect in the grants going out. People need to see this not just as tax credits. They need to see visibly new plants coming up, new factories coming up, new jobs being created. We need to go not just to the Des Moines or to the Ann Arbors. We need to go to mid-sized cities, to places like Sioux City, to places like Dubuque, Iowa. And we need to show what we're doing in those communities to build new jobs. Fort Dodge, I was just talking to J.D. Schulten, which is why Iowa is on my mind. He's in the state house in Iowa and was talking about how he's one of the few in rural America. So we need to show it visibly. The other thing we need to do is have the president, have members of Congress really standing with the corporate leaders and educational leaders to make the case for what we've done. One of the things, I was talking to someone on my team who went to Columbus, Ohio for Thanksgiving, and she said that her boyfriend's family, who happened to be Republicans, actually gave Intel all the credit for the factories coming. They didn't give the government any of the credit. And, you know, one of the things we need to learn from FDR is he was a marketing genius. He had New Deal painted everywhere, every sign, everything. He took credit for New Deal. We've got to be out there visibly taking credit or showing people why the government actually is responsible for these new industries, new factories. Or what you're going to have is people will just say, oh, that was the private sector.
Yeah. Yeah, they say it all the time. It's like the old, get the government's hands off my Medicare line.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and talk about, say, the FTC and antitrust in the Justice Department and other moves that the Biden administration can make without Congress.
Well, look, I support the FTC and strong antitrust to make sure that that the companies in my district are not abusing their platforms by privileging their own products or charging too high of commission. And I support the efforts of people like Senator Klobuchar to have thoughtful antitrust legislation, and in the absence of that passing, the FTC and Justice Department to take action. Though it's tough for them because the case law is so deferential to businesses and the business judgment rule. If Congress doesn't act, it's hard. But let me give you one case which doesn't get as much notoriety that we really ought to think about. It turns out that there was a company in my district, a startup, that was creating an app that would allow DoorDash drivers to be able to use one platform that would do their routes, whether they were driving for DoorDash or Uber Eats or Amazon. So they're doing 2, 3, 4 of these assignments, and they would have the maximal route that would give them the best revenue for the deliveries and be the most reasonable and not driving all over the place. Mm-hmm. And they got sued by DoorDash to say, no, you can't have access to this data. This is our data. Well, data in some ways is the modern means of production. It really is. Who controls this data? Is it just the employer, or do employees have some right to ownership in data? We talk about your and my right to our own data from a privacy perspective, but we need to talk about data also from an economic perspective. And this is where I think the FTC and Justice Department really can help in defining rules that employees have to have access to data that can help them develop more of the gains of the digital economy.
They can just promulgate those rules, can't they?
They can.
Yeah.
They can. And this is an area which is undefined, where the courts haven't weighed in, which is kind of technical, but really could be life-altering for an Uber driver or a DoorDash driver, where suddenly they now have much more leverage in using multiple platforms than they do if they don't have any access to the data that they're helping generate.
How united do you feel the House Democratic Caucus is around some of these issues? It obviously spans a lot of territory ideologically, from the people in the squad to Josh Gottheimer and people close to him. Can more or less everybody unite around these things?
On the data point I made, I think people could unite. On some of the basic antitrust points, people could unite. Yeah. I think where the differences come in is the degree of correction that we need. Yeah. Everyone recognizes that the working and middle class have been left out. Everyone recognizes that that globalization and automation have concentrated wealth. The question is, do we just kind of tinker? Do we view the government as solving market failures? Or do we have to have a totally new vision of government involvement in helping shape markets and helping build new industries and helping invest in childcare, healthcare, where it's not just the government coming in to solve a market failure, it's the government working with institutions to give people a fair shot in a 21st century economy. And the progressives obviously believe that there has to be a total rethink of the role of government to support the working and middle class. And I think some of the people on the more centrist part of the caucus are more looking at the government to solve individual problems where there's a market failure. And that's really the difference.
Yeah. I think another difference is rhetorical. And I think that you guys, Democrats, broadly speaking, Democratic elected leaders, in the way you talk about these things, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I want to run this past you. You need to name names. You need to have some villains and some bad guys. You want to tell a story to voters so that they get. And stories need villains. There's no Disney movie that doesn't have a villain. A lot of Democrats are hesitant to name bad guys. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. Now, John Maynard Keynes said that we're all slaves to a defunct economists. So
Yeah.
we can start by saying that some of the economists were villains for giving us this idea that all that mattered was price efficiency and everything will work out and just let capital go wherever. But then we have to also name the big corporate greed, where corporations basically said, we don't care about communities. It doesn't matter if 50-year-old, 100-year-old companies are going bankrupt. We want the cheapest price. We want the cheapest labor. We want no environmental standards, and take on both the corporate greed of the financial institutions, the corporate greed of big oil, the corporate greed of big pharma, and then say, well, here is our vision for how we're going to work with business, with government, to build the new industry. And we aren't going to be anti-business. We're going to support business, but with conditions, and those conditions are going to be a strong working class and investment in community. The great thing about that platform is it is totally unoriginal. It is how Hamilton built America. It is how FDR built America. And FDR got 4 terms. I mean, I don't understand why the Democrats don't just look at what he did. I mean, it was quite successful.
Yeah, did pretty well. And still doing pretty well, actually, in a lot of ways. Last question, just broadly, lay out for people where you want the party to be going into 2024, whether it's Biden seeking re-election, which I guess it probably will be at the moment, or whether something happens with him and it's somebody else. What are you going to spend your time in these next 2 years trying to make sure the party is identified with in voters' minds by that time?
Michael, I'm going to make my sense that the Democratic Party is the party that's going to make America a vibrant, strong, prosperous economy everywhere. And that we have to link both our policies with the revitalization of communities that had their jobs shipped offshore, that had their jobs destroyed. But we also have to make the case that childcare, that Medicare for all, that investments in college and in trades are patriotic investments, that we have the vision that is going to make America the superpower, economic superpower, world superpower of the 21st century. And we understand why people are upset. We understand why people feel betrayed. But here is the vision that's going to get us back on track. And by the way, it's rooted in American history. It's not something revolutionary away from America. It's actually grounded in what built America. And I think that those themes of economic strength, of wealth generation, of prosperity everywhere, of patriotism are critical for the Democratic Party to start to win back voters who should like a lot of our policies.
I'm also glad you said the word investments instead of spending. Just start with that. Just get everybody to say investments.
Who do you think we should have as our villains?
Some oil companies, some pharmaceutical companies, beef monopolists, chicken, there's 3 chicken companies. Show people, hospital companies that merge and can charge whatever they want for a hospital bed. Show people.
By the way, in terms of let's make things here, the polling showed overwhelming support for the CHIPS Act. But you know what the 3 things Republicans said we want to make most here? Chips, steel, and meat. And so going at these huge corporations in beef or in chicken that are offshoring some of these jobs, that aren't having U.S. made labeling, these are things. If we had a better vision, if people were convinced we would be better at making the steel here, making the chips here, making the meat labeling here, I think we'd start to win people back. I think they don't believe us because for 40 years we supported as a party, not me personally, but as a party, the China's ascension into WTO, NAFTA. So we've got work to do to rebuild trust.
People, listen to this man. See, he knows what he's talking about. Congressman Khanna, thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.